It was around 2 a.m. on the 27th of March in 2011 when a train operator noticed something in the middle of the tracks near the Blanchard River and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge. At first, he thought that the object in the middle of the tracks was a deer. However, the closer he approached the object, he saw that it was a lifeless body of a young woman.
Hello, I'm Brent.
And I'm Scott.
And this
is Strange Embers. Vera Jo Reigle was born July 11th in 1986 to Verna Messersmith and Willard Reigle. I hope I didn't butcher that last name. She was born in Findlay, Ohio. Vera Jo was a very sweet young girl from the reports that I was able to read. She had a bit of a cognitive disorder. Now, I tried to dig in and research what kind of cognitive disorder she had, but there was nothing that was specific on what kind of mental disorder she had. They did say from some of the reports that she had a type of hyperactive disorder. Also learning that her mentality that she had almost kind of seems like she might have been slightly autistic. It pretty much made Vera have a cognitive ability of an 8-year-old child at the age of 16. So you can imagine with her growing up with this disorder, going to school, she was bullied a little bit. But in the same end, even though she was bullied, she still was able to make friends, and everybody knew that she was a very sweet, loving, and kind individual. She wound up graduating in 2005 with the help of the specialized classes and teachers, and she did get her high school diploma. Most of Vera's school friends and members came out after her death saying that she was cherished and she was a gentle and reserved individual who found joy in singing along to country music. She had a loving family once her father was put behind bars. Up until the point he was put behind bars, he molested her all the way up until age of 11. He was found guilty of sexual abuse and he served 20 years in prison. So for her father to be arrested, it actually brought a lot of peace of mind to her so that she knew she wasn't about to continue to be molested and raped by him. So all the torment wound up stopping whenever he was arrested. Her life became a lot easier. She started actually not having as many issues in school and with friends. And she started getting a lot of support from her mother. Her mother didn't believe her at first that he was doing anything until she caught him. Once she caught him, she was very apologetic, saying, I'm sorry that I didn't believe you, this, that, and the other. Now, everything was fine and dandy until Vera Jo met the Brooks family. The Brooks family was literal hell for Vera Jo. Now, all the hell did not just come in at once. It crept its way in over a span of 5 years. She thought that the Brooks family was there to help her and support her. However, it was very sinister, way more sinister than she could have ever imagined what the Brooks family actually wanted with her.
So how does it always seem like when somebody's in one of these abusive households, it just seems like if they leave out of an abusive household, they just fall right back into another abusive household?
That's actually a very good point, because I know a lot of the times that I've read on some of these cases, that's exactly how it is.
Yeah, it's not like this is the first time we've run into that. It's over and over. We'll run into these where it's a terribly abusive household, however the abuse may be. And it goes from there to they go to the saving household, which is worse than the first one that they were in.
That's exactly how this was. Now, granted, being molested and raped by your father, that's got to be bad. But you're going to learn just how much worse it can get for a human being.
It's just hard to think that it's going to get worse.
It's bad. So just remember, she's intellectually challenged. She has a disability. I'm gonna assume, just because of my experience with autistic people and different levels of autism, I'm going to assume that she probably has a case of some autism, maybe something else on top of it.
Right.
She found it really difficult to hold relationships because of this. You know, her mental state, she's so much younger mentally than she is physically. And it was hard for a lot of people to grasp that. Now, at the age of 19, she met a guy named Zach Brooks, who was 13 years old. She, with her mental state, she thought, okay, this is fine. You know, I'm the same age as him pretty much. We act the exact same. So technically, I guess you could say she started to groom him, but she had no knowledge that that's what she was doing, was actually grooming him. She thought that, okay, I really like this guy. He really likes me. You know, I finally found somebody.
Right.
So Vera Jo's mother and stepfather wound up moving away from Ohio. And the boy, Zach, his mother, her name is Sherry. So Sherry, after finding out that Vera Jo and her mother and stepfather were about to move away, she offered Vera Jo a place to stay there so that she didn't have to leave her boyfriend, Zach. That way they could still be together. She's like, I'll treat you as family. I'll treat you just like my daughter. You know, it's all going to be great. So keep this in mind. 4 years later, so they've already been together for a year, Vera Jo and Zach gave birth to a baby girl, and her name was Willa Dean. That is key to this whole thing, the baby. Sherry had a really big problem with letting her children leave the house. I guess you would say very aggressively protective.
Okay.
Because she had a lot of kids taken away from her. When Child Protective Services were called, she'd have kids taken away. Since she had her kids taken away, she wound up, you know, saying, hey, the kids I do have, y'all aren't leaving. Y'all are going to live here until I die, pretty much.
Right.
Now, I think if I'm not mistaken, she had 12 kids, and 7 of them were taken away from CPS.
No kidding.
Rape, sodomy, molestation, assault, all the above. Yeah.
Were they taken away at different times, or is this all at one time they came in?
Two were taken at once, and the rest were taken different times.
Wow.
It was said that Sherry would assault and sexually do things to the children, but then it's also said that some of her ex-boyfriends did it too, and that's why they were taken away.
How did they even let her take more children home from the hospital?
CPS failed horribly. I mean, every instance of law enforcement and everything failed in this case.
Because I'm assuming that some of these children were born after said crimes and kids were taken away. And the reason I'm saying that's because otherwise, why would they have took some of the kids and not the others?
We'll get into it.
All right.
I might be jumping ahead, but I'll go ahead and tell you why. So I told you the baby that Vera Jo and Zach had was key.
Okay.
Sherry couldn't have kids anymore because of this reason. CPS would start taking her kids away. So pretty much she would have her sons knock a girl up.
So she could try to take those children.
Vice versa with her daughters.
Wow. Okay.
So the members of the Brooks family that were still with her compared themselves to living like the Manson family, if that tells you anything.
So this thing boils down to, all in all, this whole story is going to be coming back to Sherry a lot.
Yes.
Okay.
It all revolves around Sherry, also known as Sugar Babe. That was her name, was Sugar Babe, because she dealt methamphetamines and crack, and that was her street name. And she held that name very proudly. So now we're going to go back a little before the child. This is 2 years leading up to where Vera Jo was murdered. The police have been called to the family's house numerous times. I think it said 10 to 12 times due to complaints of harassment, threats, child abuse, neglect, fighting, poor living conditions. I mean, anything and everything. On the 21st of January, Vera Jo's sister, Ashley, called police and said she was being held at the home against her will and wasn't allowed to be involved with her baby at all. So, according to Ashley, the only reason Sherry agreed to let Vera Jo live with them was because she was receiving Social Security disability checks, and that was about the only proof that she had. So, when Vera Jo moved in with Sherry, Sherry started saying, hey, if you want to live here, you got to give me your Social Security checks. She was cashing them out. She pretty much went to the bank or went wherever you got to go. She went there. She signed it over to Sherry in Sherry's name so Sherry could get them. Officer Marcia Hill responded to the report and uncovered that Sherry was Vera Jo's guardian and the payee of her disability checks. Now, the more we do some more research into that, Sherry coerced Vera Jo into doing this. It was not something that she was willing to do. She did not want to do it, but it was more held as blackmail for this.
Right.
Vera Jo was routinely beaten by members of the Brooks family, particularly Zach and Sherry. Zach being her boyfriend and Sherry being the mother. Officer Hill reported that Vera Jo's face was bruised and cut, and she had sustained a broken nose. When she questioned Vera Jo, Vera claimed that the injuries were caused by an ex-boyfriend from Lima. Well, we know that Vera Jo's not leaving. She's stuck there. She's being held against her will. But she doesn't want to say anything because Sherry's holding other things against her. The truth was that Vera Jo had been so broken down by the abuse that she pretty much accepted, hey, I'm going to do what they tell me to say. I'm going to say what they tell me to say and do what they tell me to do just so it'll stop. Me and you know that when it gets this severe, there is no stopping. People are going to continue to go until you break them, completely break them.
Right.
So when Officer Hill was questioned as to why she didn't follow up or investigate any further, she said, I asked her if she thought this environment was healthy and safe for her and Willadine, and she stated she thought it was. I pointed out all the hazards I could see in just the front room. She looked around the room and said this was all she needed. Now let's go and I might be jumping a little bit ahead again here, but I'm going to explain why Vera Jo did what she did. Willadine was the blackmail to all of this. Sherry said, I will take this baby from you. I will kill this baby if you tell anybody what's going on in this house. So with that being said, that kind of gives more of a backstory. You kind of know what's going on.
Right.
During the welfare check on Vera Jo, Officer Hill also noted that the home was filthy. There was a bathtub filled with black mold. There was a mattress that sat on top of rotting food. No box spring, no frame, just a mattress on top of rotten food. There was even a pig, like oink oink, living inside the home, confined to a closet by a piece of plywood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine how this house smells and looks on the inside.
Right.
3 days later, police would return with child service worker Officer Sean Nungester. We're just going to call him Officer Sean.
Let's just do that. Let's go with Officer Sean.
Yeah. So they returned with Officer Sean, who reported seeing cockroaches in the home. The report also read, in part, when we opened the door, a very foul smell was coming from inside the house. The house was very dirty, and it did not appear that the Brooks family owned a vacuum for the carpets. In addition to beatings from the family, Vera Jo was also withheld food. This was noted in some of the notes that Vera Jo looked slightly anorexic, looked like she was losing a lot of health, looked unhealthy.
Okay.
And whenever the child service worker, Officer Sean, was there, he didn't find much there to eat. All he found was filth. As news of the previous calls to police were made public, the community were left questioning why more hadn't been done to protect Vera Jo. And this is what you were asking. Why did Child Protective Services not get involved? I mean, that's a question everybody's got, dude. Nobody has an answer for it. It was just one of those that I don't know if they didn't care, if they were in on the loop. I don't know. The school system, social service agencies, healthcare providers, and law enforcement all had rules in place which they are required to follow dealing with people with mental disabilities that may potentially be suffering from mental or physical abuse. There are checks and balances built which are supposed to prevent these individuals falling through the cracks and getting lost in the system. Despite the numerous investigations, they did not result in the state providing Vera Jo protection. In the wake of Vera Jo's murder, her biological mom, Verna, came back to Findlay to arrange her funeral. When she came back, she spoke to the Brooks family, commenting in the media that they were talking back to her, meaning saying, I don't love her and I didn't want her. She said that Daniel and Nicole had abused her in the hours before her death and that the entire Brooks family knew about it. So when we go back to that quote, they're talking back to her saying, I didn't love her and I didn't want her. That's what Sherry was preaching to Vera Jo in the weeks and months before her mom and stepfather moved away. She was just ingraining that your mom doesn't love you. I love you. Your mom doesn't. I do. She don't. So that's where that's coming from. Just days later, Willa Dean was removed from the Brooks home after the funeral, obviously. She was placed into foster care while Verna and her husband attempted to seek custody. Then on April 5th, Daniel was formally charged with aggravated murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, felonious assault, tampering with evidence. Nicole was then charged with aggravated murder. So that's what's happened up until this point. After the funeral, we know Vera Jo died. We kind of got a backstory a little bit. Now let's get into the things that led up to the crime. Upon the gruesome discovery at the train tracks, it was first speculated that Vera Jo had been hit by the train just because of how horrible the sight was. However, when they did an autopsy on her, Dr. Mark Fox determined that she did not die from a train. She suffered blunt force and sharp force trauma to her torso, head, and legs, and the attack had been committed at the train tracks where her body was discovered.
I'm looking at the pictures of it right now.
Yeah. So after the discovery of the murder, the news pushed this out, throughout the region. Newspaper ads, websites, all the news channels, everything was covering this. And it sparked a very intense public outcry. Now, it didn't take long before an arrest was made. I think it was actually within 24 hours, they apprehended Daniel Bixler, who was 21 years old, from Tiffin, and his 17-year-old girlfriend, Nicole Peters, from Fostoria. And they were both in connection with Vera's tragic death. Now, to give you a little bit more insight, Daniel Bixler, he's a Brooks relative. He's one of the sons. 3 weeks before Vera was killed, he was released from prison. His incarceration started in July 2008, following convictions on charges of burglary, theft, and receiving stolen property in Seneca County. His history, I would just say his rap, pretty much included a huge pattern of violence, drug abuse, dating back to his juvenile years and continuing into adulthood. Now, while he was in prison, I'm going to assume it was while he was in prison because there was nothing that was stated outside of it. He wound up killing somebody because in prison, he wound up joining a gang, Crips to be exact, and he had a teardrop tattoo. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the teardrop indicate that you've killed him?
Mm-hmm. Each teardrop's supposed to represent a murder.
Yep. So he had a teardrop, so keep that in mind. He's also previously faced charges of assault and domestic violence during his youth, and one included assaulting a 7-year-old with a metal baseball bat.
Wow.
So it was said that Peters, Nicole, which is Bixler's girlfriend or fiance, whatever you want to call her, was very envious of Bixler because he had a teardrop tattoo and she didn't, and she wanted one. So when the opportunity arose, that's why she was in on this. On top of that, she found sexual gratification, and so did Bixler. They both found sexual gratification on it, that when they were doing it, beating her, they would stop, go do things, come back, beat her more, stop, go do things. It just rinse and repeat. That's not when they were killing her, but that's when they're at the house when they were just beating her. Yeah. So Bixler and Peters wound up getting charged with aggravated murder as the investigation into Vera Jo's death continued. Detectives learned that at the time, Vera Jo had been living with the Brooks family and had been here for the past 5 years. She had a 17-month-old daughter with Zach Brooks, who they named Willa Dean. Obviously, you know this already, but that's just how the report goes. According to Zach's mother, Sherry, She looked at Vera Jo like her own daughter, commenting, "She'd do anything you asked her to do." I freaking wonder why. Also living in the home was Zach's brother, Michael, and his wife, Shannon. About a week before Vera Jo was found dead, Bixler and Peters had moved in. Bixler wasn't a good influence on anybody. He had lived a life of transientness. He was an alcoholic. He did drugs, including ecstasy, cocaine, and marijuana every day, from what this says. And the detectives actually uncovered a very strange dynamic within the Brooks home after doing some digging in on who was there. So this is going to throw you off. Bixler's father, Daniel Bixler Sr., was Sherry's cousin.
All right.
Now,
so the tree don't fork?
Tree don't fork. Tree continues to go up.
Okay.
They wound up having a baby together named Scotty, Sherry and Daniel Bixler. After that, the Brooks home was riddled with abuse. We're going to get into her other kids. Her first 5 children, including Scotty, had been taken away by Child Protective Services after allegations of sexual abuse. Okay. At the time, Bixler Sr. was incarcerated after stabbing his wife's lover. So he has sex with his cousin, has a baby with his cousin, and then gets incarcerated for stabbing somebody who was sleeping with his wife. Detectives continued in their investigation, and one of their first points of action was to piece together Vera Jo's last known movements. To establish more, they interviewed all the Brooks family, as well as Vera Jo's family. Now, according to Ashley, which is Vera Jo's sister, we've already heard some of the things she said before. She had seen her the day before she was found dead. She was sitting outside the Brooks home, and Ashley recalled, quote, "I said, I love you." And she said, "I love you too." She has never told me I love you. Every time I said I love you, she said, "Yeah," end quote. This drew a huge red flag.
Right.
When someone struggles with severe autism, the emotional connection is hard for them. And a lot of times whenever they do show emotional connections, something's not right. Nonetheless, I digress. Something wasn't right. Ashley knew it. Ashley had already called the cops. The cops said, "Look, we can't do nothing about it, so stop calling us." This happened, obviously years before. So she just said, "There's nothing I could do about it. That's it." Investigation uncovered that on the night of the murder, Vera Jo was sexually tortured and beaten by both Daniel and Nicole while inside the Brooks home. There were numerous witnesses to the brutal assault, with some reporting that they had tortured Vera Jo and stomped on her. According to Scotty Emmons, son of Sherry and Daniel Sr., after the assault, Daniel and Nicole said they were going to take a walk with Vera Jo. They ordered Vera to put her shoes on. If you're Vera Jo, you've already been beaten, you've already been sexually assaulted, you've had all this going on, and they're wanting to take you for a walk. Could you imagine what's going through your brain right now?
Yeah, what's about to happen?
I know I'm probably about to die. I know this is probably it for me. So as she was leaving, she turned around and asked Scotty if he would come with them because she was very scared. Scotty wound up trying to put his shoes on, but when he returned to the door, Zach produced a knife and told him he was not going to go with them. So he was pretty much forced to go sit down. Vera Jo walked out crying. As she turned around, she said, "Good night, sugar babe." That was her last words, talking to Sherry.
Sugar babe Sherry.
Yeah. Vera Jo was then forced out of the home by Daniel and Nicole. They stripped her naked in freezing temperatures at the train track. Under the dark sky, Nicole stabbed Vera Jo once. She quoted, "Show me your love," as she gave Daniel the knife. Daniel responded with no words, no verbal, just stabbing Vera Jo several times in the chest, back, and throat. After he stabbed her in the chest, back, and throat, he wound up stabbing her in the leg and cutting one of her tendons to prevent her from being able to escape. Nicole then took the knife back and stabbed Vera Jo repeatedly. As Vera Jo attempted to defend herself, she cried and said that she couldn't breathe. When they wound up returning to the Brooks home that night, Daniel bragged, "I killed that bitch and she's dead on the tracks." Now, when they killed her, what they did is they wound up, they threw the knife away in a pond on the way back. Before they threw the knife away, though, we'll get to this, but when they disposed of her body, they laid her across the track, like ankle one side, head the other.
So hoping a train would come by and
pretty much kill her and dismember her completely.
Right.
Now that did not happen. She wound up, and I hope I'm not jumping, I think I am, but she wound up being able to take her last breath and last effort to get in the middle of the train track, get between two railroad ties, get into a fetal position, and that's how she died.
Yep.
Following the arrest, Daniel led police to the murder weapon, which was a butcher knife they had disposed of in the Blanchard River. The detective wound up saying that the knife was so dull that he could push down really hard on his skin and it would not cut.
Oh, wow.
According to people within the Brooks family, the motivation behind the murder was that Vera Jo had allegedly sprayed mace and caused someone within the family to have a miscarriage. Others said that Vera Jo had angered Nicole by looking at Daniel. That was misinterpreted as she wanted to have sex with him or be his girlfriend. There were other rumors that suggested Vera Jo had to die after she accidentally dropped a brick on Sherry's foot. Now, there's one huge one that comes to me is when the police come to the door and say, hey, where's Vera Jo? Do you know anything about her? And Sherry says, no, she had an argument with her black ex-boyfriend. We know that she never had a black ex-boyfriend, but they had a family friend that, I say family friend, throw that in air quotes, that was a black male, and they were hoping that he would get busted because he came around quite frequently.
Yeah, send it to his
right.
Mm-hmm.
During the media attention on Vera Jo's death, a lot of people raised question as to why other members of the Brooks family didn't face charges. It was just Nicole and Daniel. Vera Jo, who grappled with a lot of disabilities, seemed to have served as little more than a source of monetary gain for Sherry and her relatives. However, in the middle of May, news broke that 4 members of the Brooks family had been formally charged with obstruction in relation to Vera Jo's murder. Among them was 18-year-old Zach Brooks, who happened to be the father of Vera Jo's baby. He faced 2 counts of obstructing justice. Sherry Brooks, Michael Brooks, which was Sherry's 26-year-old son, and Shannon Brooks, which was Michael's 21-year-old wife, each faced 1 count of obstructing justice. And this is all for lying to detectives during the investigation.
Right.
The charges stem from allegations that the 4 family members had provided false information to the police during an investigation into Vera Jo's murder and had impeded the inquiry on the day Vera Jo's body was discovered. Now, on March 27th, we know that's when she died, or that's at least when the body was found, 2 a.m., March 27th. Could you imagine, I'm going to stop here and we're just going to talk for a second. Could you imagine what it must have been like for her?
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at the pictures right now. But I mean, you can see there it is right there. That's where they found her. There's that one picture right there, and it's got somebody's got a flashlight, headlights, or something like that on her.
Yep.
And there's a picture took from the side where you can see that's where she is laid over.
Yep.
Yep.
Now, if she wasn't emaciated and pretty much starved to death, she probably would have been hit from that train. I mean, because she looks like she's just skin and bones almost right now.
Right. Whenever you said that she was on it sideways, that's what I was looking at these. And
yeah.
I was just waiting for you to carry on.
It's crazy.
Because I was about to say, she wasn't on there in the pictures I saw. She wasn't sideways.
Yeah, that's sad.
It is.
At that point, I think I'd rather be hit by a daggum train. You have a higher chance of living.
Yeah, probably really do.
So we're going to get back to this. Let me explain what happened to Vera Jo. And this wasn't just whenever this happened. I mean, this was ever since Bixler got into the house from prison. They had a chain that had a master lock on the end of it. Not like a thick chain, but a small chain like you would put on a dog or something.
Okay.
And they had a master lock on the end of it. And they would all take turns hitting her with that chain with the master lock. When they got all their fulfillment out of that, they would kick her. Dude, this is by far one of the nastiest messed up cases I've literally ever read on. Just because of the sheer amount of crap they did to her.
All of these like this, it always surprises me of why do they stay there? Why? I mean, at that point,
well, when
why
this
are
one,
you not homeless on the street?
And this one in particular, she had a child who was being held against her. She loved this child. All she wanted was to have a kid. That was her only thing that she ever wanted was, I want to have a kid. And whenever somebody threatens to kill your child because you want to leave, I mean, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it with the kids. You do things that you wouldn't think you would do for the kids.
Days before this was going on, they were starving her, as we stated previously. And one of the things they found to be freaking hilarious was when she said she was hungry, one of the kids would go outside, pick up dog crap, go inside, and force feed it to her.
Really?
Yep. I can't remember which one it was. It was either Scotty or Zach. I can't remember which one. It was one of those two, if I'm not mistaken. They shoved a knife on the crime scene pictures. It's not going to show it, obviously, but they wound up shoving the knife in her rectum. For the Patreon, what I'll do is I'll grab the link. I'll grab the links to the interviews.
Yeah.
And we'll put them on the Patreon. I don't want to put them on YouTube just because of how graphic it is. There's a lot of stuff that's blurred out. And you'll see just how they act. It's an interview on all four of them. All four of the main ones. They were laughing about doing these things to her. I mean, it's just like sickening. So let's go back to the obstruction charges. There was a second obstruction charge on Zach, which entailed accusations that he had intimidated a juvenile witness who had come forward to the authorities with crucial information pertaining to Vera Jo's untimely death. All four pleaded not guilty. Sherry, Michael, and Shannon were released on personal recognized bonds. Shortly thereafter, 14-year-old Chuck Brooks, who was the youngest son of Sherry, was charged with obstruction. That's the kid. Chuck's the one that fed her crap. Literal dog feces. The young one did. And he bragged about it too, by the way.
This reminds me, I was actually doing some studying about another case, Jennifer Daughtry.
I haven't heard that one.
I don't know if you've heard about it. That's a lot to do with kind of like this. She was mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
And as she got older, she was just a quick, I'm not trying to go into anything, but same thing. And when it happened with her, when she was murdered by 6 people, kind of the same scenario, what you're talking about. One of the parts, they had her eating feces, drinking urine, just very, very just deprived. I mean, it was,
at that point, I'd rather you just freaking kill me. Don't make me eat feces and drink urine. In June, Daniel Bixler wound up pleading not guilty by reasons of temporary insanity. He had taken an exam which his defense attorney Keith Sherlow said expressed a potential limited comprehension by mental retardation and a low-level IQ. Now, let's be honest, when you take these tests, you can make those tests however you want them to be. Judge Reginald Rooston subsequently issued an order that Daniel be evaluated at the Court Diagnostic and Treatment Center to determine whether he was competent to stand trial. 2 months later, Zach pleaded guilty to 2 counts of obstructing justice and agreed to testify against both Daniel and Nicole in their upcoming murder trial. In court, he admitted to lying when he told police that Vera Jo had left the house on the night of her murder with her new boyfriend. He also admitted to threatening a minor's life after he divulged details to him about Vera Jo's murder. Michael followed suit, pleading guilty to 1 charge of obstructing justice. He admitted that Daniel and Nicole had confessed to the murder to him and his wife, Shannon, who also pleaded guilty. Sherry then pleaded guilty to obstructing justice and also admitted that she knew Vera Jo had left the home with Daniel and Nicole, yet claimed to police she left the home with a new boyfriend previously. Towards the end of August, Daniel was deemed competent to stand trial. However, he then changed his plea and pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. He remained emotionless throughout the entire court hearing and admitted he went to the tracks with Vera Jo and I ended up stabbing her. Daniel Bixler was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 40 years. Nicole also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. During her court appearance, she said that the murder of Vera Jo had been planned. She claimed that Zach, Sherry, and Garth, which is one of Sherry's sons, and Shannon had helped to plan the murder and that Zach had provided them with the murder weapon. The murder was premeditated and planned, she said, after Shannon accused Vera Jo of causing her to have a miscarriage by spraying mace.
The murder weapon looked like they had just opened a kitchen cabinet from the 1970s and found a knife from...
Didn't care how sharp it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that knife looks like it's seen better days.
Yeah.
So according to Nicole, every member of the Brooks family was present when Vera Jo was brutally beaten before her murder. She said that many of them even took part. According to Daniel's attorney, Keith Sherlow, The Brooks family had become frustrated with Vera Jo and said that something needed to be done about her. They kept trying to push someone into doing this, and unfortunately, Danny, all he knew from his upbringing, from his family, from being in prison prior to, was unfortunately violence, he said. Nicole Peters was sentenced 23 years in prison, which was the longest sentence she could legally receive. Once her sentence was handed out, Nicole made an apology. She stated, Vera was a very sweet, kind, enthusiastic individual who lived life to the fullest. For her to be beaten the way she was is something no one should have to be put through. I know no amount of I'm sorry will justify or bring Vera back, but this is me making amends and taking responsibility for my actions. This is also coming from the same chick that stabbed her, that helped sodomize her, that beat her, then went and had sex with her boyfriend, and then came back and beat her more, and then went back and did it again. Yeah, she's sorry. She ain't sorry. Vera Jo's mother, Verna, contended that Nicole's apology was purely for show in front of the judge. In the wake of the unsettling revelation that the Brooks might be equally culpable, Vera Jo's family couldn't help but wonder why they escaped with a lenient sentence. She questioned, why are they not in prison? Why are they not where Nikki and Danny are going? That was one of Vera Jo's cousins. April, that's her name, April. Notably, Garth had not even faced indictment in the murder investigation. Garth was a 14-year-old that fed her feces. The guilty plea raised more questions than answers. What drove them to kill Vera Jo? Was it jealousy? Possibly fury? Maybe some revenge on something? Some kind of twisted horror kink?
See, through this entire thing that you have been telling so far, I've been asking that same exact question the entire time because I have seen nothing yet just point to a here's why we did it.
No. And let's go back. Vera Jo was the only one that cleaned the house. She's the only one that took care of Sherry. When Sherry's feet hurt, because she was diabetic, she was wheelchair bound. When her feet hurt, Vera Jo massaged her feet, massaged her legs, gave her body massages, back massages. Vera Jo cleaned up after the pig. She was never allowed to see her kid. She was kept captive from her kid. Her kid was kept in Sherry's room 24/7. Never to come out. Couldn't see her mom. Couldn't see Vera Jo. Nothing. What's the point?
So what was Sherry doing?
I think
with
the
her
point
child?
here is Sherry wanted another kid to do nasty crap with.
Yeah.
And she wanted the mother to be dead. She wanted the kid to be hers, and that's it. So how do you do that? But Vera Jo's living with Sherry. If Vera Jo somehow dies or goes missing, the baby's adopted.
Do you think Sherry... I mean, this went to trial. What did Sherry put them up to this?
This is all Sherry's plan. This was her whole intention.
But when it went to trial, did it ever come out
Nope.
that she actually got them to do this?
Nope. So back to the questions as to why, what was the motivation? It's a mystery, and I guess nobody's ever going to know. Now, we asked the same question earlier, and I got this question. With it being Vera Jo having a mental disability, she was familiar with social services, more than likely. How did she wind up letting herself get stuck in this predicament and exposed in this? Before the baby was even born, she was having warning signs thrown at her. Sherry wouldn't let her go see her family. Sherry wouldn't let her go talk to her sister. You can't leave the house. You're stuck here. Before she even had the kid. It was Sherry's plan for them to get impregnated. Literally everything boils down to coming back to Sherry. It's some kind of sick, twisted issue that, and I'm going to say this wholeheartedly, that bitch had, was whatever this is, it's...
Sherry was the mastermind.
Yeah.
What did I miss that? What did Sherry get?
She got 40 months.
40 months.
Yep. On top of 10 days, she spent in jail for having contact with a minor.
I mean, she wasn't there and killed her.
No, but
with her hands.
But she's the mastermind
everything
behind it.
Else.
She started it. She's the one that provoked the beatings. She's the one that provoked kidnapping. I mean, literally everything. If Sherry was not here, none of the crap that came would have ever happened.
I mean, it's just like you brought him up earlier, Charles Manson.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is.
He didn't go kill anybody, but
that's a case to cover
he
in
spent
itself.
the rest. Yeah, it is. But he spent the rest of his life in prison.
Yep.
So
this
40 months.
Some speculations emerged suggesting that Sherry fixated on Vera Jo and Zach's daughter, Willadine. Allegedly, when Zach lost interest in Vera Jo, which did happen before the baby, the Brooks family saw no further use for her. Willadine was ultimately transferred to the Children's Protective Services, where she was put up for adoption. Zach had attempted to get custody from behind bars, but he was not able to, as you could tell.
Did you say attempted to get custody from
while
behind
in jail?
Bars? Where did he plan on bringing the child to? How do you get custody of a child while you're behind bars?
Hey, rejection.
Something.
In 2013, there was a gravestone that was eventually installed to honor Vera Jo's burial site. The generous contribution came from Steve Johns, which was the co-owner of Finley Monument Company, who was moved by the documentary Goodnight Sugar Babe, The Killing of Vera Jo Reigle. It was a show. I've tried finding it, and I don't think it airs anymore. You know, a lot of these cases, they'll air it for like 5 years, and then they take it down.
Right.
I'm sure there's a way somewhere to find it. I couldn't find it. I was more intrigued on reading the story versus watching a documentary on it. To wrap this up, Daniel and Nicole are still behind bars. However, the others that did contempt and all this, they are walking free.
I think that is a very crazy case. It leaves you with more questions also, shall we say?
It really does.
Because at the same time, it is a why. Same thing I said earlier. It's a why did Sherry only get what she got? Why did these kids? Why did they let her keep kids still? It's just one after another. It's why?
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. I don't know. And that's another thing that intrigued me about this is it's just.
Well, let me ask you, same question you just asked me. What did you think about this? You're the one that went to the research.
When I was doing the research on this, I was stuck between, I was going to do a kind of a heavy hitter. It was either going to be Edmund Kemper or this case. And I already know a lot about Edmund Kemper. And I was like, okay, that's be an easy one for me to, get just a couple more details and we'll make a good episode out of it. And then I read the case on this. It popped up under one of the documentary sites I was reading on for Edmund Kemper was Goodnight Sugar Babe, The Killing. And that's all I could read, The Killing. And I'm like, all right, caught my attention. Let me see what this is about. And it's like the within the first, 2 paragraphs, I had an idea that this woman was mentally challenged. She was abused and she died. It's like, okay, I need to read up on this. And reading up on it, I'm like, I'm blown away. One, I know there's people in this world that are really messed up, but how can someone be that messed up? I'll still never be able to wrap my mind around any of it. How you could do this to one individual person. I don't know. The case has blown me away from the start. From once I started reading it, I was instantly hooked on it. I wanted to know more. And there is a lot more detail in it that really isn't pertinent information, but it is interesting to know. Like a little tidbit here. One of the kids, not Zachary, but Scotty and somebody else, wound up being quote unquote the Crip leader of the area.
Right.
And we know Bixler was in a gang. He got the teardrop. So was that accurate? And it's also said that Sugar Babe or Sherry was the gang's dealer, which is where she got the name from, was selling meth and crack. So it's just little details like that you can go back, you can read on if you wanted to. But I just didn't feel like it was pertinent. There's a lot more detail that needs to be heard, like what we went over tonight.
I have been fascinated with serial killers I say serial killers. There's some of them that we covered just like this. It's
just
not
killers.
Serial killers. But yeah, but I've been fascinated with serial killers for most of my life. I've always thought that it's interested me in the fashion of what makes them tick. Why? It's those kind of questions. So
I don't think
doing this podcast with you.
I don't think Sherry had a tick though. I think she was just batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
But
it's I mean, just doing this, it's the same thing. It's one of those, I don't know, I want to find a way to kind of answer the questions I have when I study these cases. And as the podcast keeps going and we keep going through cases, it's one day are we going to find a link? One day are we going to find what makes them tick? What is that thing that revolves this whole thing around? The other side of doing this podcast for me is the flip side of that coin. It's not just what makes them tick. It's other people are so have no spatial awareness. They have no idea what's going on around them, and they have no idea of where is crazy lurking. It's one of those, by going through these and people that listen to these, for me, it's that flip side too. It's not just we're covering, hey, there's a killer. It's also keep your head on a swivel. Know what's going on around you, because somebody else is going to get killed tomorrow.
Yep.
And it don't have to be you.
What Brent's trying to say is keep that thing on you.
Well, that's a very interesting story. It was.
Anything else that you might have that you would like to add to this? Any closing notes?
The merchandise is live.
Brent, we're gonna put a link in the description?
Yep. It's in the description of anything. Whatever you're listening to this on, it is in the description.
Awesome.
Along with the Patreon. And on Patreon, the graphic pictures of this particular story, the pictures of the crime scene, we're going to have them on. Yep, they are graphic. So if you go to Patreon, they'll be blurred out and you're going to have to click to look at it. But they'll be there. They'll be on Patreon. For those people that really want to go and take a gander, then it's there.
Now, is this going to be for all subscriptions or just
members?
Paid tiers?
Yeah, just all members.
All members. So you could be a free member. You don't have to pay anything. It's a free subscription. You could get some of the detailed images. If that fancies you, then do it, because it will draw everything in that we're talking about on position of her body on the train tracks, sheer amount of what her body looked like, where the clothes were strode all over the place whenever they stabbed her and stripped her naked. Got pictures of all kinds of stuff on there. So
did you tell everybody thank you?
Brent, why are you making me feel like
I'm just saying, did you?
You're making me feel like a school kid right now.
Because it's not just me and you right now. There's somebody else that's listening to this. And I just want to know, did you tell them thank you for sticking around?
I haven't said anything personally about sticking around and thank you. At least not for a couple episodes. So
you should try that.
I do want to.
You should try that.
I want to thank each and every one of y'all that have been here and listened to every nuance and every idiotic thing me and Brent have ever said.
Only the ones that's been here?
Well,
what about general, this is their first episode? Are you including them?
General. First episode, okay. Second episode.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't matter. Look, pre-StrangeEmbersPodcast, when people were thinking, I wish there was a podcast out there that was just two dumb guys who thought they knew everything, that don't even know how to operate a computer hardly, would through a podcast. I would listen to those guys. So those people that had that thought, thank you. Thank you for believing in us.
Now, the person that hit like, are you going to tell them about the little dance you did that they couldn't see, but I could?
Look, if you do a dance, I will. Oh, wait, no. You're not going to do the dance, but if you hit the like button, I'll do a dance.
Oh, you're going to do that dance thing.
We call it the
dance thing.
We call it the dunce dance.
And what about the ones that hit subscribe?
Now, if they subscribe,
tell them about tell them about the whole entire little jig that you pulled?
If they subscribe, Brent, I might just have to wear a wig while I dance.
Yeah. They're not going to see that either, though, right?
Well, probably not.
I will, though.
You'll get to see it. You'll get to see it.
I will live vicariously for them.
And they won't even get to see
laugh.
you do it either. But no, on a serious note, thank you for sticking around and being here with Strange Embers. We're going to continue to keep on keeping on. Patreon's going to start taking off here soon. Hopefully by this month or next month, we'll have a little bit more context and content. A lot of C's there.
A lot of C's.
We'll have a lot more coming up this month. What we're going to try to do is stay ahead on Patreon for these multiple episodes.
Did you mention that we're hosted on Audio Boom now?
I did not mention on Audio Boom. Tell us the details on that.
And if you go to Audio Boom, it has all the links from there to whatever you want to listen to, from iHeartRadio to Amazon Music to Spotify to everything that Audio Boom hosts us to, we're on. So if it's something that you particularly want to use to listen, then we should be there.
So what you're saying is, let's just throw a hypothetical out. Say someone's working and they don't want to keep YouTube up on their phone because it drains your battery significantly. They can go to audioboom.com/StrangeEmbersPodcast or whatever the link is. Link will be in the description.
audioboom.com/channels/513-4702-strange-embers-podcast.
All right. Like I said, description. It'll say Audio Boom on there, audioboom.com. Click that link and you could set whatever you want. You know, follow us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple. All three of those are pretty battery less intense than YouTube. But I know if you follow us on those, it will throw you up a notification when we post an episode. Also on Patreon, if you are a paid member, tier 3, going back to Patreon, if you are a tier 3 or a tier $5, those are dollars, $5 and $3 tier, you will be able to get multiple part episodes simultaneously.
Immediately.
Yep. So you don't have to wait 2 weeks to get the second part.
If they're not up immediately, they're up
within a couple days.
Close.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're recording this at night. Has it thrown you off since we've been recording in the mornings lately?
You said have a good night earlier, and I was like, oh, it is.
Yeah. All right, man. Well,
I guess it would be night unless they were in Brisbane. That would be day.
What about Moscow? It'd be super early morning, wouldn't it?
I think so.
Anywho, thank you for watching. We love you.
Thank you for listening. Bye.